Hi, Ben. Hi, Dave.
Hey
Hey,
guys.
Carl. Hey, Dave. This is fun. It's good to have such great
I'm
humans
I'm
in the
glad to
chat.
be I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is gonna be fun.
So, without
Always
further
good stuff.
ado, people know Dave McNair from a previous episode of Secret Sonics and maybe from recent guest appearances on
Oh
the
yeah,
Attack
that's
and
right.
Release
Yeah.
show. Um, but we want to get right into it today. And you've gotten even deeper into vinyl than even the last time we spoke. I'm kind of curious to hear what your
Yeah.
thoughts are on the state of formats. Like what do people expect format wise these days? What are you delivering?
Well,
What's the future of
um,
vinyl and other formats?
I'm in like the ninth inning of my career. So like, I don't, if I was 4 or 5 years into it or something, I might have, some serious thoughts around that. But like, I'm not doing any looking toward what's going to be happening down the line because I'll be retired pretty soon. So, I mean, I'll keep working because I love doing it. But the vinyl thing for me, it started, well, it's never really fully taken off for me because the lathe keeps breaking down, which is a major drag. It's not here right now. It's in LA, getting more work done to it. So, at one point I was like, all right, I'm either going to sell this or keep trying to make it work. But, and part of the problem is I got like this massively custom one-off lathe because I wanted it to sound really special. But anyway, I mean, I don't really care what formats take off or whatever. I have no interest in Atmos. I thought for a minute. I had some clients ask me if I do that, and I kind of looked into it and got the renderer. I was like, no, I don't want to do this bullshit. So there's that. And then there's just the digital stuff. And the digital stuff is what it is. And then there's the vinyl stuff, which I hope to in the pretty near future, I'll put something on my website saying that I will only be mastering things that are going to go to vinyl. Um,
Whoa.
and that's because I love doing it, and um, and I don't really. I mean, it would be great if the vinyl resurgence continues because then more people will ask me to cut lacquers, but um, I hadn't really even thought about that because I don't know. I'm gonna how long am I? I'm gonna be 66 in a couple of months. About another 4 or 5 years. I don't know. Um, so I'll keep doing it as long as I enjoy it. But at this point, I don't really want to do any loud pop singles or I don't 4 song EPs or something. Like I just don't want to spend my time doing that. I'd rather travel and do other stuff. But as far as the work, probably toward the end of the year, beginning of next year, when I get the thing back online, I'll probably just I'll do some digital mastering, but only for people that want both formats. Is kind of how I probably see it going, in the not too distant future. But yeah, I have no idea what formats are gonna take hold or increase or decrease. Or I mean, I hear a lot of things about. There's some segments, certainly in the audiophile network, that really think CDs sound better than streaming. But you know, I don't know how people are going to start making CDs again. But
Yeah.
if they want them, they can. I send up. Well, I actually send up tons of DDP, so I guess people are making CDs.
Really?
So
I think there's still like a fairly easy to make, like it's like a merch item. I think that's kind
it's a
of
merch.
more
It's
how,
cheap too.
yeah, it's cheap. It's something that they can sell at shows, and it's a way to make extra money instead of just ticket
Totally.
sales. So it's not, it's just not used as the vehicle for the main
Right.
vehicle of consumption for
It's
the
not the
music.
yeah.
It's the
It's not
same
the
thing as like a T-shirt
it's not
or
the vehicle.
stickers.
Yeah, it's not the vehicle of discovery or the main thing. It's just another kind of value added format at the gig, like you said. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay, can I push back a little bit on the whole ninth inning thing for a second, because I don't believe it. I feel like I
This
feel
guy's
like every
he's
time
got
I
a lot
hear
of vim
somebody
and
talk
vigor
about
still.
yeah, you've got I feel like I think I would venture a guess that you're gonna retirement for you is just gonna be saying more no often, not just like stopping, right?
Except I have a side gig, which I'll do more of. And that's my alliance with the audiophile community. I review high-end home stereo gear for an online magazine, and I go to the audio shows, and I have friends at more than a few companies that would be glad for me to be their brand ambassador and just travel around the world to hi-fi stores and shows and yak about stuff and play stuff and get paid for it. So
Not shabby.
if it's between that or doing a reggaeton single at -6, what do you think I'm going to want to do?
So you just get to select your gigs, right? As you get into that ninth inning, you get to be as selective as you want to be.
Yeah. I mean, I I don't tell anybody to go away now. I mean, that's just too harsh. But I've been kind of trying to think about how can I maybe work a little bit less. And so after 45 years of grinding, you just don't I just don't want to grind anymore. And I mean, there's some weeks that are so busy, it's like it kills me. So, and I've tried working less days a week and all that kind of stuff, but then the days that I do work are all filled up. Which is, I mean, it's not a bad problem to have. I'm not complaining. I'm just got to figure a way to work less without. I mean, even started not working as much during the day, thinking, well, most people want it right away, and some people will wait a month. I don't know. They don't typically book a month ahead, but they'll wait if my production manager says his first opening is 3.5 weeks from now. Only because I only want to do 3 projects a day rather than 8. Yeah.
Wow.
So, okay. I have a lot of questions about this, because I think something that we, generally speaking in the industry, don't think about, let alone talk about, which is retirement. Yeah. Right? There's so much talk about the hustle and the grind and the go. And I feel like I've been saying for a long time that I feel like most producers and engineers don't fully understand how to look more than 2 or 3 years into the future.
Yeah. Well, for me, my ADHD is so bad I can't look more than what's tomorrow.
You're in good company here.
So I guess my thought, yeah. So I guess I'm curious, when did you first start seriously kind of I don't want to say considering retiring, not in the sense of oh, it's impending, but when was the first time you were okay, this is a career that I do want to have not necessarily a stopping point, but even just a transition point into that,
right.
The audiophile side.
Right. Well, it was when I decided that I wanted to do primarily really good sounding stuff. I don't want to do an endless stream of mediocre lounge singers that are recorded with 2 microphones live that everybody freaks out because it sounds so great, but they're not very soulful. I don't want to do stuff. I don't want to do typical audiophile BS, but I do want to do really good sounding stuff. And if possible, 90% of it is great sounding. So part of that came about when I decided to do the lathe thing. Although, like I said, it hasn't fully, it'll be online for a couple of months. I'll cut some stuff and then some weird breaks. And, I learned how to fix it, but it really has to go back to the folks in LA that put it together. And it's living right now at a guy's kind of electronics lab. He's got space. He's got a listing room and stuff. And he's the guy that put it together in the first place. So he's going to trick it out for me. but it's kind of this incestuous thing with the hi-fi community because he's a very talented electronics designer and he also specializes in tubes, but he's one of those rare guys that's like 40. Like it's very hard to find guys under the age of 60 or 70 that know anything about vacuum tube design for audio gear. And I'm not talking about making like a Pultec copy. I'm talking about a power amp that's got 16 tubes in it and it's 300 watts and it sounds unbelievable. And he has to figure out how the transformer designs can interface. Well, I helped him get a job with a very esteemed American company that builds and sells high-end vacuum tube stuff. So, because the owner, the guy that bought the company is a very close friend of mine. He also has a speaker company and I use his speakers for mastering and I have his speakers at home in my home setup. So there's two companies essentially that he owns that are respected high-end audio companies that they are interested in doing super high quality vinyl. And I would just I'd record it too. I do it from start to finish because I was a recording engineer for 20 years. So I'd rather go to some location and record some cool singer-songwriter with a great band that, or a jazz quartet or a string quartet or whatever, and take it from the microphones to the finished record, do the whole thing myself, than do loud pop singles all day. So I said, okay, I've got an opening to this community. So how can I get their interest and maybe do more audiophile specific projects? And I started cutting lacquers and taking them with me to the hi-fi shows and playing them. And people were like, oh shit, that sounds good. Like incredible. So I kind of got the ear of some people and, so that's kind of where I'm headed. And that wouldn't mean, retiring from audio engineering. It just means I wouldn't come here 5 days a week and work for 8 hours a day mastering. I would just have other things going on.
It would just be a pivot.
It'd be a pivot. Yeah. And also I really like travel with my girlfriends. I mean, I just really like to do a lot more traveling and stuff. And, it's a wonder that turning knobs has kept my interest for 45 years. It's kind of amazing. But you do it long enough and you're kind of like, well, there's not a whole lot of new stuff to learn. And the other thing I want to say too, and this is something that I don't want to chastise people, but I want to let them know that the quality of stuff is crap compared to what it used to be. And I get sent a lot of stuff by people that really should have a real mixer doing it, but they're mixing it anyway. And, pretty soon I'm just going to say, you know what, buddy, you need to spend another 10,000 hours mixing because I don't feel like wasting my time doing your half-baked crappy mix, even if you're going to pay me full rate. So there's a lot of that. And back when I first started, man, you had to be good. You're working for a label. They got a bunch of money invested and not everybody gets to do that. So, you had to be good. It was like to play in a band. Your guitar had to be in tune. You had to hit all the notes. Your singer had to hit the notes, had to have a great voice. There was no helpers. And that same kind of migration away from having to have raw talent and a point of view about your music has become, there's some people that still have that, but a lot more people, just want to put their stuff on the internet or they want to be famous or I don't know what their motivation is, and the democratization of DAW stuff is phenomenal, but it just means, if there was in the old days, there would be like 100 releases a year. And now there's 100,000. So you can't maintain the quality through that many things. Right. And I'm just not interested in serving the people, as horrible as that sounds, So I want to just do I want to do the best sounding stuff, and the best sounding stuff is people that can really play and really write great songs and have great engineering things to get there. Yeah, the other pet peeve I have about people sending me stuff is it seems like every like fourth project they want me to tell them like how it could be better. I'm like, that's not my job. Just you need to just listen to find the best music to listen to, or the best or the great engineered music that you like the music, and try and reverse engineer it, figure it out. Like everybody, I had to learn. I didn't have any tutorials. I just had to do years of kind of okay mixing, and then it got better and better, and I learned some stuff and went along. And now that process can be compressed in a very short amount of time, and you don't have to be just like born talented. If you've got a point of view and an attitude and a sensibility for the music, I mean, you can definitely learn to be a good mixer. But in the old days, like guys who were mixing for labels, they never go to the mastering and go, how did I do? What did I could be better? They're like, I got hired and paid a lot of money. I'm good. And now people they don't want they want some validation and they want some tips. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to validate your stuff because that's not me, And if I were to I could tell you how to make your mixes better, but it's going to take hours and hours and hours. And I don't have time to do that. It's not as simple as like, oh, you should turn the bass up a little bit more, or like next time make the vocal a little bit louder. It's like, you know what, your sense of EQ and how everything is panned it's not good, and I don't have the time to sit down and tell you how to make it better. So anyway, I don't want to start off negative, but those are two things that have kind of been bugging me. People sending really marginal mixes and not knowing that they're not very good. They don't go, I just learned to mix and I know this is not very good. They're like, check out my shit, make it better. And they're ultra critical about the mastering. Like, why are you being so critical when your mix sucks? Like, think about the mix first.
Yeah.
And so
I just don't know if it yeah. I just don't know if it could go any other way at the beginning. You know what I mean? Because I'm remembering the first time I sent off a mix to a mastering engineer, and I was petrified of what the mastering engineer was going to say because I had
never.
They're not
going to say anything because they don't really care.
Right. Right.
I mean, I've been very lucky that like the mastering engineers that I work with like do care.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's what I was going to say, and I feel like for myself, like. I understand not wanting to sink a ton of time into it, but I think also like personally, I feel a bit of like a sense of responsibility to also try to help the next generation so they don't just keep on making shitty mixes. But again, it depends on their attitude, and if it's like if they're gonna send something that's for a production for me to mix that is just not good, and then they're super critical about the mix, yeah, I'm gonna be very annoyed with it. But
yeah,
I do try to give them the benefit of the doubt at least once. that they're trying to get better. Yeah,
I don't pass any artistic judgment. Like it could be very conceptual, deconstructed art kind of stuff. It could be, bands sound like Nickelback or something like that. I don't really care about that. I'm not put off by style. I'm put off by sending me a mix that's not really done. Like you gotta. What are you listening to? Like, how are you judging this? And I'm not talking about like, well, the balances are really good. It's just got, they don't hear the low end in the room, so there's way too much low end. And you just correct the low end, the mix is great. Like, I'm talking about just crappy EQing and bad balances, and like I don't. And now, if I get something from somebody that's kind of in the beginning phases of their mixing. And it's not great yet, but I can tell in a second that they've got pretty good ears. They're really committed to making their stuff good. And those guys don't even usually ask me. I will call them and say, man, your stuff is really good, but if you got a minute, I'm going to tell you. And I'll spend an hour and a half on the phone with them. But that doesn't happen very often because it has to be already show promise. And I've had 4 or 5 guys over the years that have really helped raise the bar to be great mixers. But their initial stuff, while it was good, while it was not as good as they later became, it was good enough for me to hear that it was worth me spending the time. I get sent a lot of stuff by people that like, it's so far from being where it needs to be. I don't have any business telling them how to do the whole thing. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah. What do you think is
so
that
I do reach out.
differentiation? Like with like budding
It's
mixers?
just the differentiation. You mean because
yeah, like why does one mixer, like what can you tell about a mixer that says like this guy is like, or gal is like really working hard, or like really is on the path, you know?
The EQ is really good. Conceptually, it's really good. Like he's made decisions, you know, sonic artistically that I thought was really good. You know, the track sounds amazing and the vocal's not quite there, because the hardest thing is to, and the most important thing is to make the vocals sound great. So I'll be like, you know, I'll give him some tips to make the vocal sound. And that's because I mixed for 20, I mean, I still occasionally mix, but you know, I mixed forever. So I know how to record and mix. And the principles of mixing from way back then are still the same as now. There was a point like years and years ago when I was trying to get out of recording. You know, the money had gone down. I didn't really think about mastering it. I thought, well, and this is like late 90s. I thought, well, maybe I'll like do a course or do a small school or something like that. And I sat down and I basically spent months writing a recording and mixing tutorial. And I had to take apart concepts that I'd never really thought about, you know, until I wanted to teach somebody. And so I evolved this whole kind of my method so that I can draw on that and talk to somebody and tell them, you know, like one thing I'll tell them is like, do it very quickly. Don't get stuck on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Think about like you're carving the statue. Don't get stuck on the nose. Just keep going around the thing, and then just get more detail as time goes on. The other thing I'll tell them is don't use any effects until the very end, and spend a lot of time on panning. And if possible, pan hard left and right and center. And if I tell somebody just to go all of a sudden, only pan hard right, hard left and center, don't use any effects until the very end, work quickly, and spend more time on the vocal and the bass instrument than anything else, their mix levels their quality will jump 30% overnight. And it's only something that took me years and years and years of just record, mix, repeat, because I, you know, worked at studios and whatever came to the door, I would do. So I had a lot of opportunities, but even then, if you're just doing bands and artists that come in the door, you know, you might not work for a week or two, and then you're busy so it took a lot of years to sort of figure out what was important and what was not important. Like for a long, long time, I would mix without any compression on the overall bus. And because every time I would get the mix like pretty happy, I think, oh, maybe we should compress it a little bit. I put it on, I go, no. And then when I moved to the big city and saw how the A-lists were doing, I was like, oh, okay, you put the compressor on from the beginning and you mix into it. And then you'll have a different kind of thing. Then you can get the density and the control without it. You know, you're changing the mix into the compressor. So, I mean, sometimes I'll tell people about that, you know, put it in from the beginning and turn the threshold way down, use these settings, and then open the threshold up. The more you start to fill things up, turn it down, you know. I think I learned that from Neil Dorsman. The first thing you do in an SSL is like turn the quad compressor like wide open with the threshold all the way down, start putting the faders up, lessen the threshold, turn the output down. And then by the time he's at the end, he's got enough room in the threshold and the output. So the output's great. He's got just enough compression, and Bob's your uncle. And that concept might not be found on the internet anywhere. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
I wanted to ask you, unless you have a question.
No, go for it.
Oh, so the approach of which I fully agree with, like the approach of focusing on like the sculpture and like not getting stuck on the nose, right? I is it safe to assume that you take that same approach with your masters as well? Like you just try to get through it.
With the masters, the only thing I listen to initially is the vocal, and all I do is I EQ to make the vocal sound good. And then after I've gotten the vocal pretty good, then I, along the way, kind of simultaneously, I'd be like, okay, do I need anything else for the track that will make the track better that won't interfere with the vocal? But I just make the vocal sound good. That's like the number one thing. So I'm and I'm not usually doing so much EQ. It's kind of messing up the track. But obviously, if you have a bright track and a dark vocal, or a bright vocal and dark track, it's problems. But if they're all in the same universe, I just make the vocal sound really good, and that's why I always use MS EQ.
Yeah,
it's not a case by case. The Sontec permanently sits in MS. The other, I've got one or two other things that can be MS, and then a couple of things that are stereo. And the Sontec is my vocal EQ.
That's crazy. You probably get so detailed with it.
Not really. I mean, it's kind of a broad brush. Like if there's a, boxy thing, I might pull out some 500. If it needs more presence, 1800, 8K, whatever. But the reason I like the Sontec, and well, not just that particular unit, but I like the format, is there's only 3 peaking filters and 2 shelves. And since the beginning of time, people have made great masters with 3 peaking filters and 2 shelves. So it's almost like a Rubik's Cube. When you operate within that limited menu, instead of going, there's not enough, I need another 7 bands. You're just like, I'm going to make myself just use this 5 band, 3 peaks, 2 shelves, and shuffle the cards until I get as much as I can. And then if I really have to have one more thing, because I've dedicated one of the bands to something, I'll use something else for a little additional top, or I'll use something else for a little more bottom, or I'll use a digital to just carve one little thing out. But it's always to make the vocal sound good. And then and the track too, But
yeah. So the EQ is would you say is the most significant thing you usually do for masters?
EQ is everything. That's about 95%. And you'll find if you go to the big studios, that's all anybody ever does. They just EQ. They don't fool around with too much other stuff, really.
Everything's so compressed anyways.
Everything's so compressed anyway. And, the compression, I mean, I do use compression, but I mean, I've got these super expensive VacuVox, but really I could just, any compression. It's like, the question is really not like, oh, what characteristics of this compressor is the thing? It's like, well, does it need compression or not? And it doesn't, I could use a plug-in or a box, or like, I don't care. I'm either going to make it a little more dense or I'm not. And the tone of the box or the ballistics of the plug-in, whatever, I don't give a shit about that. It's just like, I've done masters with the Waves Renaissance compressor. Like, I don't care.
I love that, because what I've noticed is that people that have been in the industry and doing and this is not just with mastering, this is not even just with audio, but just anybody that has a craft and some kind of like creative passion that they need to be technical in some way. It's like when you first start out, you don't realize what's important. And then you hit a stage where you think that everything is important, and you learn and you study all the manuals, and you obsess over release times and everything. And what I love is that, you've gotten to the point where you're just like, EQ is everything, compressor can fuck off, I don't really care, I'll do whatever. You know what I mean? It's like you really realize what are the things that actually make the most difference.
I pretty much will always try some compression. It's not that I want to leave too many stones unturned, but I'm not I'm not like, oh, now I'm going to finish it with a little bit of this, whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, I had a phase of that for years, but that was a long time ago. And like
We all do.
you said, I got deeply into all this stuff, and there's no doubt that there are a few special pieces of gear that do kind of a special thing. But the audience is not going to hear that or know. That's like for other mastering engineers. Nobody cares what 8K on the Sontec sounds like on 8K on something else. It's like it's either bright enough or it's not. And I'm acting a little bit flippant about that because I'm surrounded by nothing but absolutely top shelf, modded, pimped out gear. But I do that just to amuse myself. I just do that to amuse myself. I don't do it because I think I have to compete with the market or anything. It's like and I go through different phases. I'm like, today I got some time. We're going to do everything analog, and I'll listen to it and go, yeah, there's something cool about the analog. We'll do that. And some days, like, I don't have time. It's going to be all digital today, and it'll sound just as good. I just don't have the time to write shit down and lay it down in real time. It's like, and I was thinking about selling the Sontec, and I got it fixed recently. Needed something because that I can't think of the guy's name, but the Metric Halo Sontec thing. It sounds amazing. Maybe it doesn't sound exactly like my box, but nobody would ever know. It's
Right.
just not. And I thought, why am I going to keep this thing? They're going for so much money. I should just. And then I got it back from the guy yesterday, and I was like, fuck, it sounds better than ever. He fixed a bunch of stuff. He fixed a bunch of stuff that I didn't even know was broken, like a bunch of weird things. And it sent me a printout. It's matched side by side. Every band is within a tenth of a dB. I was like, it was never that good. Plus, it's just the top end sounds amazing. And this morning with the Zydeco thing, I just did a digital versus analog thing. It's a, I don't know, 14 song record. I'm going to do it after this. And I did it analog, and I kind of went, well, that I'm kind of using, let me do this first song digital too and see. And I did it. And I didn't try and duplicate my settings. I just popped the Sontec EQ and a couple other things on there. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty good. Then I went back to my analog. I was like, no, the analog is the one. I'm just going to have to spend the time doing the whole thing analog. But this same client, many times in the past, I've done this. Well, not the same client, the same mix engineer. It's probably more than 50% of the time I've done this stuff digital. So,
Right. They don't know or care.
they don't know or care because they trust me they know I'm going to be, at the same time I sound cynical and flippant. They know that I'm not going to let it out until I think it's the best it can be, So,
Yeah.
let me put I got 20% battery, but I can't plug in the charger because I'm using the thing. Let me turn this to let me put this on saver.
Gotcha.
Battery. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Low power mode. Okay, good. That'll give me some time. So
Great.
I don't know if that answers the question, but no.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know what the question was.
I was thinking about that meme when Carl was commenting. It's like, it's like, the guy's brain exploding or whatever. Like, it's like this, that. Oh, it's actually just that, and that's like the major explosion that, you know what I'm talking about, like the audio memes, or just memes in general.
Yeah.
But maybe we could get a little geeky about the Sontec. Like, what is it about the Sontec that is the vocal EQ? Like, what is the quality of that piece that makes it your go-to for that sort of?
It's because I always have it sitting in MS for one thing, so I can just work on the middle. I could use any other things. When I had it out, the guy took a really long time to repair because it's hard to find out about how to repair them, and he also had to find chips no longer made and stuff like that. So I what do you have, maybe 6 months or something, and I had my I had this thing. I had this thing, which is a great EQ I had in the spot here. And I kind of like, well, this sounds as good as the Soundtech. I mean, this is fine. I just use this. And for 6 months, I didn't, go home feeling weird about using a $2,700 EQ is the main thing. Because the guy that builds it is Denmark. I mean, it's really clean. It doesn't have much of a tone. It's pretty much clean, but it gets the job done. But the curves are totally different than Soundtech. It's you have to approach it very differently. And it's only 4 bands, and the shelves are not very good. So basically, it's 4 peaking bands, and sometimes I use the backs or something else for shelf. But so yesterday I got the thing back from the guy, and I pulled out the Golly Net EQ. It's basically Barry Porter, but it's his own design, and I've heard other Barry Porters. It's significantly different. I think it's really good. So I put the Soundtech in. I was like, oh well, this is better sounding. So, but not so much that like really, I'm going to hold on to this thing. I probably get 20 G's on reverb tomorrow for it. Like, what am I really going to hold on to that?
That's your retirement fee. These are your retirement pieces right here.
So yeah. So I don't know. I'll keep it for a while. Maybe I'll end up.
Yeah, you can get into the weeds, but it like you said at the beginning, it's like the client doesn't know. Everyone's happy. You're going to go as far as you can, no matter what, with whatever piece of gear you have. So it's just to keep you happy and for fun and for like if you can do it, you might as well do it, right?
Yeah, totally. And the thing I like about the Soundtech, like I said, it's very few. There's an almost infinite amount of choices within just those 3 peaking bands. You got 5 fixed. The bandwidth is clicks, ultra wide, ultra narrow, 5 different choices. You got a zillion frequencies. And then you've got the high is fixed at 10K, the high shelf, a low shelf can be 100 or 50. So within those few variables, you can really do a lot. I would say the thing that I didn't know in the beginning when I first started mastering, I was still doing a lot of recording. I thought I was just doing my own stuff because they didn't have the budget or whatever. This is like early 2000s. And I'm a really good mixer. So like my own stuff, like a little bass, a little treble. It's just, trying to use this limiter plug-in, make it loud or whatever. And then as time went on and I started doing other people's stuff, I was like, oh, well, you have to like use more than a little treble or bass. Like I got to do some stuff. But I didn't approach it like mixing EQ or recording EQ, but I thought, okay, I can only go so far with this EQ. I need some other things. I need some dynamic alteration. I need some stuff to try and get this to sound like, like kind of what I'm hearing in my head. And what I didn't do is I didn't give enough time to perfecting my relationship with the EQ. It wasn't until I got jobs in the big studios where I saw the other guys like, oh, all they do is EQ. So if that guy is going to get those kind of results with EQ, there's more to it. I need to figure this out. So it's not that there's any secrets or there's any magic frequency or anything like that, but just conceptually, like how often would you add 2 or 3 dB on the sides only at 400 hertz with a medium Q? Well, I didn't know to do that until I saw George Marino do it and heard the result. I was like, oh shit, that does a thing that I would never intuitively reach for.
Yeah.
It makes things kind of dense and more full.
It makes it hug you.
It makes it hug you a little bit. And 200 doesn't do it. 300 doesn't do it. 500 doesn't do it. It's got to be right around 400. The other thing is like when everybody starts out and they get a good EQ or a really good plug-in, or their speakers are good and they can really hear what's going on the top, man, everybody goes, oh, I need some air. Air can sometimes really be the enemy of a very cohesive kind of thing. And so for the past probably 10 years, I try and use the least amount of top boost as I can. And I mean, I'll go to 20K or 15K or something, but the money is like 8,800, 9K. It's all right around 10 or below. 8 to 10K is really, that's where a vocal will get airy and will have presence, and all that stuff at 10, 12, whatever. It'll kind of put an overall sheen on it, but you got to be careful. If it's any kind of like singer-songwriter or rock or whatever, it'll just make it too pretty. It'll just it will de-attitude it. They'll be like,
right.
No, we don't want our stuff to sound that expensive. Yeah. It's not, So
yeah, isn't that around where that bump is in the 87 and the U87 and that mic, right? Like the Neumann mics have like an 8K boost sort of thing.
87s don't. Yeah, I don't know. 87s don't really have any air. There's not really much above, not subjectively much above 10 or 12K in 87s. I never loved 87s. They're kind of edgy and not bright at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm usually not the one with nerdy questions, but I have a nerdy observation that I've seen in a lot of mix engineers, and I'm curious if you've noticed this too. But I feel like, especially since the dawn of YouTube University, right, when people are learning how to mix, I feel like there's always, well, number one, low end is always just like fucked up in general from people like doing it themselves. But what I've kind of noticed, and this is going back to when you were talking about how like too much air in top end can just like destroy things. I've noticed that the mixes that I end up loving so much, there's so much more control in the top end of the instrumental getting out of the way of the vocal, which enables the vocal to just be that thing on top, like I think we colloquially talk a lot about, kick and bass relationship and like one should be below and whatever. But then I think with the top end, it's just like, oh, cool, let's just have everything live up there. And then they wonder why the vocals aren't bright enough. So they add fresh air onto the vocals, and then well, sounds like that.
Let me tell you about I don't want to interrupt, but that brings to mind one of the parts in the course. And then I realized early on, I don't know if somebody told me, but when you're getting the mix together, the reason you want to work on the vocal early on, or maybe you just put the faders up, even if you know the song really well, you record it, you just put the faders up to kind of get a really good balance. And you're not going to dig into the EQ much. It's just whatever. I see in a DAW, it's dangerous because you've got whatever was left over from, you're like always mixing. But let's just say I'm approaching recording kind of old school, even in a DAW, and I'm EQing a little on the way in, but not like extreme. Just the snare needs a little top, whatever. And most people, back in the old days, most people will cut a vocal flat. If they did EQ it, it would be a hint of something on a 1073, or it would be one click on an API 550 at 10 or 12K, and then they left it alone and compressed it healthy, put it up. So then after everything has been overdubbed and added to it, and things are, pretty much at the end, the first thing you do is you get the track up, and before you EQ any of the track elements, you put the vocal about where it's going to be, and you listen to the vocal in relation to the track. And maybe it needs just a hair of top, or when I mix, I almost never add vocal high end to the top, but I'll pull out weird boxy spots and I'll tighten the low end up a little bit and it compress it and becomes airy. The sound of the top end of the vocal when it's really good, but it's not overly done, because you're painting the vocal sound in relation to the rest of the track, and you haven't hyped up the track yet. Leave you then go back and EQ the track around where the top end of the vocal sits, and you won't go too far.
Mm-hmm.
You just, that's your governing situation. And the other thing is that you want the top end of the vocal to roughly balance the presence of the backbeat. So you want your snare to not be any or significantly less bright than the lead vocal.
Yeah.
And if you can get away with it less, but never more, because it's always going to take away too much. And like you said, you inherit these tracks and everybody's EQ. First thing, if I mix something, I take everything off and start over. I don't want to hear anybody. I don't want to hear the rough mix. I don't want to hear anything. So, and the few clients that I still have once a year that send me stuff, they send it to me without anything. They know that. And then, and if you work quickly, let's just say you don't have to tune a bunch of stuff, you don't have to edit a bunch of stuff, but you're basically getting it together. You should be deep in the weeds in like 2 hours. Like you don't play the track over and over. Just play the section you're working on. Don't loop it. Just like get a feel for how the vocal's working with the track. I spend more time on the vocal and the bass instrument than any other elements of the track. So then if you're only 2 hours or 3 hours into it, maybe you want to do the fixes not on the day you're going to mix. Maybe you want to, you don't have an assistant. You're going to do all the fixes, do all those. And then you're worn out. You'd be like, okay, tomorrow I'll actually put this up now and start to mix. And you should have it happening in like 2 hours. Like at the 2 hour mark is where I'm then looking for delays and reverbs and stuff. I'm totally dry and I'm making it kill, totally dry. And then I look for one or two elements that maybe need some ambience to differentiate them, or maybe there's one element in the track that really relies on an ambient portrayal to be its thing. And then my brain's not baked. I can decide, well, does vocal need reverb? If it does, what kind of it? You can ask these questions because you're not burned out from having micromanaged, the stuff. And that's the same way I do the mastering. I master I have 15 minutes for a song, usually. But I can only work that fast because I'm comfortable with all the tools that I might use. And, I can sit here and say, well, 90% of the time it's going to be the EQ, but it also might be Ozone 11 Impact and Soothe and a bunch of other stuff. But that's at the end. That's just the little,
that Impact module, I would leave my wife for that Impact module.
I'm using it as
Carl, not making really, very dangerous proclamations here.
I love it.
I'm using it on this Cajun Zydeco thing, not because I'm trying to get his drums punchier than they were, but because by the time I make them super loud, I'm trying to get them as punchy as his loud ref. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, when it gets dense, all the drums go away. But like in the verses, I need to get before the Pro L2 has 8 dB of gain reduction. In the verses, when it's only 2 or 3 dB, his snare is really punchy. I'm like, okay, I got to get it at least that punchy in the verses, but then mine will be punchier in the choruses because I'm using a soft clipping. I'm not using a hard knee limiter or whatever,
Yeah.
So I'm occasionally using it because maybe I want a little more from the bottom of the snare or the bass drum or something that's not an EQ type thing, but it's generally to make it sound more like the track sounded before I had to loudenize the fuck out of it, That's another thing I do a lot is I never operate like in a vacuum. I've said this many, many times. First several years, I get it to sound good and go, all right, how loud can I make this? I have it on stun from the very beginning. 10 to 12 dB of limiting. Not of limiting, 10 to 12 dB of gain on the limiter. And what that does is it allows me to keep, I do, whether it's analog or digital, I do the same. That allows me to keep massive headroom throughout the rest of the chain. Massive headroom. Like typically, okay, this is how much I mean, I'll turn that down probably because I don't even want yellow. I don't even want yellow because years ago, me and another mastering friend of mine figured out that I don't know about all A to Ds, but prisms in general will start to compress when it hits the yellow. So I don't want. I want all my gear. That's like a. I mean, I hope you guys maybe do it different, but you used to hear all the stuff on the internet about like hitting your gear hard and kind of sort of. I want as much headroom with the gear as possible because it's all super quiet, so there's no need to like operate at the top of the rail. So if I turn my limiter off that I'm listening through while I'm recording, okay, I'm hearing it live. It's virtual. So, but what I wanted to show you is that here is the ref. Here is their non-limited mix. And here's my capture. So that's how much space I have that I've recorded. Now, when I render it, it'll look more like this. But this is what I have, you know, in the... So it's got tons of headroom. It's got 5 or 6 dB till it even hits 0. And that I think a lot of people are doing that these days. But the benefit of that is that I can change the level after the fact. I can turn it up or turn it down, and it's got tons of headroom. And you know, the it's in there. It hasn't been pounded into a converter. So if I want to make a file for the lathe or somebody else to cut, I just take the limiter off, and it ends up that the level that I'm boosting, whether it's a soft clipper or a more traditional, brick wall thing, it just so happens that when I take that off, it's analog console level. And lathes don't want anything other than just regular 0. And I have my meters offset -7. So I have to take the offset off. And if I take the offset on the meter off, it's like 0, which is exactly what the lathe wants. The lathe doesn't want 10 dB above 0, believe me. So they're just going to take a limited file and turn it way the fuck down to go to the lathe. And I'm sending them a file that they may actually turn up a little bit.
I'm trying really hard to figure out how to reword. Is it Sir Mix-a-Lot? The if it ain't got buns, I don't want none, hun. But about headroom, and it was just I was trying so hard in my brain, and just nothing came out. And I apologize to both of you and the listeners for my inability to turn a rap song about butts into your love for headroom in your mastering process.
I got big headroom. I cannot lie.
The title of the episode. Just kidding.
Oh,
but
man.
I realize this might conceptually be a little hard to get a hold of, but it works for digital or analog. It like even if I just keep it all digital, if I have an unlimited mix to work from, or if I've got a limited mix, I'm still going to probably do a little EQing to it, which will make it totally blow up unless I turn it way down. And I leave my overall soft clipper limiter thing at +10 or +12. So I might turn their mix down, their digital mix 9 dB or 10 dB or something, because I need a little bit of that end thing to keep it from hitting solid red. So, and I can EQ their limited, their very limited mix. The EQ it won't take EQ as well as an unlimited mix, but I'm not like saying, wow, it's really loud. I'm just going to leave it at that level and then EQ, and then it blows up the thing and I have to put a limit, I just turn it way down and use my same gain structure. Whether it's, like for example, if I'm using 10 dB and they send me something that's ultra loud, and I'll turn their thing down 9.5 dB, and it'll So I'll get a
0.5
half
or
dB
whatever.
of additional,
Yeah.
limiting, and it'll be half dB louder. Sometimes it's hard to even do that. Like another pet peeve is I really wish that if people were going to stand behind their limited master is like, okay, this is how I want it. Everybody signed off. It's meticulously crafted. It's like some kind of servant thing. Leave 0.3 or 0.4. Don't put it at 0 because I can't do it. Like the one thing that I have to put on it and bring it up 0.3 dB and put my final output at minus 0.3 dB. That 0.3 dB of limiting when it's extreme, where it sits, where the mix sits, it fucks it up. Just that little tiny bit is going to blow it. And the only way I can leave it at not doing anything to it is to not do anything at all to it at all. And if I want to do anything to it, I'm going to have to either turn it down and leave it turned down. Like if I said, okay, this mix is, it's already minus, 8. It actually sounds really great, but it needs a half dB or dB of 1800 in the middle to make the vocal pop. Well, then I have to the track will turn to dust if that's going to make the track a dB into limiting, and it's already so limiting, it's just going to get grungy as fuck.
Yeah.
So, at least if you're going to send the loud limited ones, have your target output at -3 or -4 or something like that. Because the client's they're not going to hear that little bit of volume decrease, but that may give me just what I need to do a tiny thing. I have a little bit of limiting that barely touches it and doesn't, but I don't do it that way. I just turn the whole thing way down and turn it way back up.
Understood.
So
Sweet.